If there was one lesson that the Hunters Guild learned during the so-called second generation of its research, it was to never discredit rumors and legends outright. Between the once-in-a-lifetime finds, like the Molten Tigrex, or terrifying encounters such as the Rajang, it had become obvious that it simply could not afford not to investigate niche and unscientific reports. Not in a world filled with so much wonder. The ears of culture and history are often more attuned to the truth than the rigid march of guild bureaucracy, after all. In the wake of this lesson, the guild thus began reaching out actively to various communities both in and outside civilized regions to record their stories and myths and use them to enhance its own understanding of the natural world and of monster kind. As far as the Old World continent is concerned, there is no better place to hear legends than Furahia. The biting cold and harsh landscape creates tight-knit, isolated communities, which in turn create elaborate and well-preserved folklore as they huddle together and keep their cultures alive around the warmth of the fireplace. One myth that quickly caught the attention of guild scribes was that of the Wyvern gods. Relate in the traditional old language of Furahia, it tells of gods that reign supreme over the lands, whose breaths are hurricanes and whose steps are earthquakes. They appear in these tales as challenges that local communities must band together to oppose and appease, as they will otherwise trample and crush all they hold dear. There are even some differing versions of the myth. Some imagine these wyvern gods as tough but loving mentors, whose threat is a deliberate test of Furahian unity. Other versions of the myth are explicitly apocalyptic, stating that the battle between the wyvern gods will be one that ends the world. Generally, these wyvern gods were interpreted by both the locals and guild investigators as metaphorical. Their strength and oppressiveness were signifiers of nature, an element that northern religions would naturally depict this way to impress upon its people the urgency of survival in such harsh conditions. But some of the myth's detailed descriptions of the wyvern gods and their bodies piqued the guild's interest enough to keep an eye or two on the region. Ironically, however, their first breakthrough in this case did not happen in Furahia, but instead in Erude, the volcanic peninsula in the central south of the continent. Out of nowhere, a massive black monster appeared and began rampaging across the region. Erude isn't densely populated, but the few settlements that did exist there suffered greatly. The strength of this unknown attacker was unreal, and the guild ended up having to mobilize an entire battalion of hunters to repel it back into the depths of the volcanic belt. Various guild scribes at the time noted that the creature showed strong similarities to one of the wyvern gods described in Furahian folklore. Further investigation and cooperation with local lorekeepers eventually confirmed that this was indeed one of the creatures that had inspired the myth, the Black God, named Akantor by the guild, a word that means disaster in Old Furahian. Also known as the Tyrant of the Volcano, the Akantor is entirely endemic to the Erude region and makes its home deep in the volcanic mountains. How exactly it entered the folklore of Furahia, a region far away from its home, is still a mystery. But there is little doubt that this is the creature the legends call the Black God. Just as the stories say, the Akantor is enormous, one of the largest creatures ever discovered. It is also extremely rare, and the ones that exist are better left alone. As a result, research surrounding them is somewhat sparse. Still, the unyielding spirit of the guild research teams has granted us some insight into the life and physiology of the Akantor. Its entire body is covered in a thick, hard black shell, the source of its epithet. This shell is extremely sturdy and resistant. Not even magma can harm it. Analysis of samples has revealed that this shell is actually not made up of living tissue. Instead, it is a mineral conglomerate that grows on the Akantor's body over time. The skin of the monster secretes a thick, calcium-dense liquid from its pores that binds ambient minerals and aerosol particles onto itself, first forming a gray sludge that eventually hardens into a black sheet of shell. Over the wyvern's life, this process grows the armor it is now famous for, the armor that grants it unrivaled defense from most possible threats. This armor is then managed and enhanced by the interlocking spikes that sprout from the wyvern's back. These structures are directly connected to the spine through muscles and tendons, and can be moved slightly. This allows the Akantor to adjust its armor to suit its needs, and the spikes also protect it from airborne attacks. Protected by this impressive suit of armor, the Akantor prowls the volcanic regions, walking on all fours similar to a Tigrex. Its size makes it a slow and lumbering creature, but what the Akantor lacks in speed, it makes up for with persistence. The wyvern is believed to have excellent eyesight and will, once locked onto a target, advance towards it until it is destroyed. Once it has caught up to its quarry, the Akantor will attack using its most prominent physical adaptation, the enormous tusks. These massive spears are deadly and specialize in piercing through the shell armor of other monsters. Specifically, the Akantor mostly preys on Gravios and, more rarely, its juvenile form Basarios. The tusks serve as a killing instrument that the victim has no defense against. Even older Gravios, whose shell is usually much tougher, stand no chance. As if the tusks weren't enough, the Akantor's saliva is highly corrosive and will actually soften the shell of any creature it comes into contact with. So by drooling on its prey, the Akantor can further enhance the deadliness of its tusks. Besides hunting, the tusks also aid in another one of Akantor's remarkable abilities, burrowing through the ground. The tusks are used to carve out a path through the earth, aided by the wyvern's impressive claws, which are hard enough to break through bedrock. Interestingly, the tusks grow by sheets of material layering themselves on top of each other periodically, meaning that a cross-section of them shows off tree-like rings that can be used to determine the Akantor's age. That, of course, requires the cutting off of a tusk, which is easier said than done. While above ground, the Akantor is an imposing force, easily dominating all that oppose it. Its enormous tail is mostly used to balance the equally massive body, but when swung around, it becomes a deadly wrecking ball. The Akantor announces its supremacy with deafening roars that even put those of the Tigrex to shame. And it can take it even further. The Akantor seems to have two mechanisms that allow for roaring. Its regular airways, which produce bellows as seen in other monsters, and an unknown, rarely studied organ that compresses air similarly to the Tigrex's viosonic system. This organ, however, is immensely powerful, nearly unseen in nature, and helps the Akantor produce what the guild calls sonic blasts. These are beams of concussive air pressure generated by weaponized roars fed into this mystery organ. These blasts are extremely destructive and give the Akantor a ranged weapon of immense power. It can even be used to shoot flying wyvern clean out of the sky, an option the Akantor will gladly make use of to secure a few additional snacks. Seasoned hunters have since realized that flying wyvern avoiding a specific area while flying is an omen that an Akantor might have settled down nearby. The Akantor excels at both offense and defense, and so it is a walking disaster wherever it appears. For reasons that aren't quite understood yet, the Akantor will sometimes fly into a mad rage, destroying everything in its path. When this happens, its shell begins to glow red, and its maw drools massive globules of corrosive saliva. The effect a rampaging Akantor has on the environment is also profound. Thus, the guild treats Akantor sightings as serious emergencies, and will mobilize itself rapidly to contain the threat. Through the Akantor's discovery, the guild's already present interest in the old Furahian myths skyrocketed. If one of the wyvern gods was indeed a real creature, then it was possible that the others were as well. Unfortunately, while the legends did describe the wyvern gods in some detail, it was not enough to construct a clear idea of what to look for. The myths described its fearsomeness and strength, not its diet and habitat, after all. But then, through what might be seen in hindsight as an act of divine intervention, the second wyvern god was indeed found in a manner most dire. At the time, the guild sent out many research patrols into the Furahia region. One such patrol had been tasked with investigating a specific branch of the wyvern god's story. In it, an ancestor of those who now live in Poke Village had actually repelled one of the gods with an enormous blade before disappearing. This version of the story was unique in that it had left a physical artifact behind, the massive blade the hero is said to have wielded, embedded into the earth near Poke Village. The patrol was meant to take samples from the weapon to bring back to Dundorma, but on the way stumbled upon a grisly sight. Numerous villages nestled between the mountains had been trampled and devastated, its people annihilated. Evidence at the sites implied that they had attempted to contact the guild, but had run out of time. Priority was immediately shifted to investigating these incidents. It appeared that an avalanche had opened up a passage to a previously blocked zone of the mountains, and that something had emerged from there. A humongous beast that was now rampaging across the region. A monster that matched many of the descriptions of one of the wyvern gods. It was only through the bravery of an unknown hunter that the threat could be contained and the wyvern could be studied. It was identified as the White God from the legend, and given the name Ukanlos, which can mean White God or collapse in Old Furahian. The Ukanlos seems to only inhabit the deepest, most remote corners of icy tundras. Due to its size, however, it can be seen from far away, resembling a moving iceberg of sorts. Until that avalanche cleared the way to the center of Furahia, those glimpses were all the indigenous people ever got to see of the White God. The guild has since proposed that it might also live in Akura, the northernmost region of the known world, and a place that is, to this day, entirely unexplored. Wherever it may appear, the Ukanlos is a behemoth that easily rivals its legendary counterpart, the Akantor. It too is enormous, covered in a thick white shell that protects it from harm. Like with the Akantor, this shell is enhanced by being fused with ambient minerals, and can withstand most threats. What distinguishes the shell of the Ukanlos is its unusual composition. Sharp, serrated scales cover the entire body, with each area having a slightly different shape. The scales on the underside of the body are small and rough, and serve to chisel and grind the ice beneath the creature to allow for a solid gait. The scales on the back, meanwhile, are larger, with the largest ones being called fins. This name implies their function. The Ukanlos can burrow through ice, and the large fins serve as massive saws that cut through the frost sheets and allow for efficient movement through the ground. The fins can also be used offensively by swimming past under a target with the sharp fins sticking out, cleaving it apart alongside the ice. When above ground, the Ukanlos might seem like it should be sluggish due to its size. Surprisingly, however, it is quite agile and can even leap high into the air. Its limbs seem to be much stronger than expected, granting it this exceptional mobility. But the Ukanlos' most striking feature is its bizarre lower jaw, which ends in a massive disc of serrated scales. This structure seems to be used to shovel snow and ice, opening up paths for the massive creature. Since the jaw scales are also serrated, it probably also plays a role in burrowing. Curiously, its upper jaw has external, teeth-like protrusions with an unknown purpose. The Ukanlos' actual teeth are inside its mouth, and suggest that this monster might be a carnivore. While it has never been observed eating, the Ukanlos is surely a fierce predator. With its ridged claws and serrated underbelly giving it a strong grip on any ice surface, this wyvern stands its ground and attacks all that it sees. It is somehow even more aggressive than the Akantor, and will actively leave its territory to wreak havoc on surrounding areas to expand its reign. It sports most of the same abilities that the Akantor displays, except one. While the Ukanlos can also produce powerful roars, it cannot shoot off sonic blasts. Instead, the Ukanlos has a different ranged weapon. By using an unknown organ, the Ukanlos stores some of the snow and ice it grinds up in its body. When needed, the unknown organ can then compress the frost material into a dense snowy slush that can then be spewed out as an ice beam. It is not as destructive as the Akantor's sonic blasts and requires the buildup of snow and ice in the body, but it can still be a devastating weapon. Akantor and Ukanlos, hence known as the two wyvern gods. Immediately upon their discovery, they caused enormous uproar in the guild. Entirely new contingency plans and mobilization protocols had to be written and canonized to deal with their threat if they emerge. But one area they truly shook up was that of the guild's classification system. Due to their size, their power, their mythological nature, and especially the effect they had on ecosystems, many scholars insisted that the wyvern gods should naturally be classified as elder dragons. For a while, this was the dominant opinion, but as more sightings of the Akantor and Ukanlos occurred, consensus shifted. Their claws, as well as their stances, were noted to be very similar to those of the Tigrex, and, by extension, those of the Wyvern Rex. The fact that the Akantor glows red when enraged also seemed like a vital clue to where they might fit in the Tree of Life. Most shockingly, analysis of the wrists and fingers showed signs of either degenerated or not yet fully evolved wing bones. Due to this, the Akantor and Ukanlos were ultimately classified as flying wyverns, in what is potentially one of the most controversial classifications in the entire history of the guild. The official hypothesis goes that the Akantor and Ukanlos are likely descendants of a wyvern even more ancient than the Wyvern Rex, and that, like the Tigrex, they did not evolve much due to their already powerful bodies. This unknown, undiscovered ancestor, sometimes called the Origin Wyvern, would then be the earliest possible emergence of what would later become the Flying Wyvern body plan. This missing link, however, remains entirely hypothetical as of now. But despite many heated debates, the wyvern gods were officially classified as flying wyverns under the suborder Nonalisopoda, and thus caused the first great revision of the guild's phylogeny. Much still remains to be discovered about the wyvern gods. Direct research is difficult and often very dangerous, so the guild has continued to investigate Furahian history and folklore alongside field observations of the monsters themselves. This approach yielded a most recent, most terrifying revelation. While most versions of the myth seem to agree that there are two wyvern gods, some speak of a third. In scattered retellings of the legend, the world is ended by a battle between the black god, the white god, and the red god. This third being is also called the sand god in some versions. This secondary name tipped the guild off that, perhaps, a third species of non-alyssopod wyvern might exist in the vast deserts of the continent. Looking into it, sporadic reports of a massive Ukanlos-like monster appearing in various deserts did in fact happen across guild history. Currently, the Mesoporta Hunters, a division of the guild that specializes in unknown, fringe, or otherwise bizarre monsters, has been tasked with investigating this third wyvern god, but results of their research are still pending. Thank you all so much for watching, as always. I would like to extend special thanks to everyone who supports the channel monetarily, either on Patreon or through YouTube channel memberships. A very special thank you to Admiral Frost, Alistair in Wonderland, Artur Centeno, Austin, Autumns, Big Mac, Black Ace 202, B, Bruggy, Chocolate Coat, Claire Miboon, Darkest, Destro, Dragonlord, Dissy, Echo but Evil, Ethan Toombs, Theopuz, Faye/Sleepy Tiki, Fjeden, Glitch NPC, Harpier, Hellbug Hunter, Hutsan, I'm Just Happy to Be Here, Inepts, Iron Camel, It's Robin Now, Jacob Coleman, Joey Tribby 58, Jonathan Ginsberg, Magenta, Carl de Crab, Kelly Barnett, Kogath, Lieferdienst, Logan Bilodeau, Lone Strider, Lufish, M1 Have 1 2, Macaroni Leviathan, Makamawi, Makot 02, Matt Hat 124, Meta Defiance, Mr. Pyramid, Molly Mockery, My Name Gone, Nico Soleil, Nils Schlatter, Noah Schantz, Oakwood Tree, Paige Gandalf Soda, Person 212, Precum King, Punonym, Quali, Quixotic Metroid 906, Rambling Robin, Raspberry, Regal Eagle, Resident Neko Arc, Wronger 97, Rose, Ryan Hook, Skiba, Shebo, Silly Wizard 97, Siragon, Sir Newt, Soruka, Tacti Wolf, The Alchemist, The Iciest Man Alive, The Dollarfish, Tigrex Chew Toy, Tsuki Midnight Boshi, Unk with Good Puss, Uthduna is an Octopus, Wandering Soul, Wolf of Time, Zaffi, Lino Garcia, Zai Banded, Zion H.V. Augenson, and Kuroneko. Thank you all, and I'll see you around. Bye bye.